Today we're in Dubai in a beautiful studio with my dear friend and Arbora partner Gaj Ravichandra from Kompass in Dubai. Good morning.
Good morning, Muriel.
How are you?
I'm good. So happy that we can be doing stuff like this in other parts of the world, right?
Voila.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what we do as outplacement companies, is that we give perspective to people. And so I thought it was really a very good opportunity to hear how redundancy is lived in this part of the world. And that's why I'm really happy you accepted my invitation. And voila. So tell me, as you know, this podcast is called The Uncomfortable Comfort Zone. Let me explain in 30 seconds. What I mean by that is that when you get fired, your comfort zone, aka the things as you know them, all of a sudden disappear because you don't have a job and every day is the same and you don't have to get up in the morning to go to a job, etc. But through the outplacement, the aim is to actually sometimes discover that comfort zone was maybe not so comfortable at all. And by our beautiful services, we can recreate a comfort zone for the person we're outplacing. So, but I can imagine that the definition of uncomfortable is very different in every part of the world. So maybe you can tell us a little bit how redundancy is lived here in Dubai?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the title, right? Because I think that is not just for work, it is for life, right? How we manage ourselves. So living in that discomfort, is such an important skill for all of us. So in Dubai, it is a heavily expat-oriented environment. The locals make up around 20% of the population. So the rest is talent from overseas that have come here to work, to create a life for themselves and their families. And so being a developing economy as well, things are moving very quickly, and things like employment, labor law, and the way that people live has changed, dramatically. No year is ever the same.
Yeah.
Right? And so as a result of that, people naturally here have to get used to being uncomfortable because things are changing all the time.
Yeah.
Laws are changing all the time. Employment policies are changing all the time. You sometimes will drive down a road and that road no longer exists the next day, right? It's changing that quick. And so when it comes to redundancy, people's visas traditionally have been tied to a visa that has been provided by the employer.
Yeah.
When that employer decides to terminate the agreement with the employee, they are given 30 days notice. That is the typical arrangement. Right? Now,
even if the person worked 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's up to the employer to decide how long they want to give. So they could extend that visa for maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months, sometimes even longer, depending on the relationship they have and perhaps even how many visas they might have. Sometimes there are quotas on how many visas that an employer can have.
Oh, really?
So there are some limitations as well. So the issue is, the discomfort is, everything is tied to your residency and your visa.
Yeah.
So your children's education is tied to that. Your rental agreement is tied to you having residency and your visa.
Yeah.
Your health insurance is tied to that. Your bank account is tied to that.
Oh.
So as soon as that conversation is triggered with an employer, it is very natural to feel uncomfortable because you know there is a ticking bomb that is about to explode. And you have a certain amount of time in which to then find another visa, right? Now, there are some things that have changed in the last 3 to 4 years where you can get your own visa under different arrangements with the government.
If you pay them.
If you pay, you could get 5-year, 10-year visas, right?
Oh, really?
Which means you are no longer held to ransom by an employer. So you can pick and choose. You can leave, you can go and become an employee under your own visa. and you can leave that organization and you can go and find another job anytime you want, right? But it's under your visa.
But it has to be incredibly expensive.
It can be expensive. Sometimes it requires you to also then fund all these other things, right? If you have children, your healthcare and accommodation, all these things have to happen.
Yeah.
So Dubai is a very expensive place to live without an income.
Yeah.
And so you don't have governmental support because you are an expat. So it becomes challenging. So that discomfort is still there.
And does the employer have to pay you when the contract is finished?
That's a really good question. So the typical process is around 3 months salary.
Okay.
Right.
So 30 days the visa and 3 months salary.
Yes. If your role is terminated, then it wasn't your choice. You didn't resign. And so then you get typically 3 months salary, and that is it.
So, and as an outplacement company, then in this situation, do you help people first with the practical side of things?
Yeah.
Do you provide this kind of service? Or?
We usually work in partnership with the HR departments of those organizations just to provide some general information, access to people if they need it. In most cases, the HR has access to those skills and those departments. What we then tend to do is to focus really on their mindset and getting them quickly moving forward.
Very quickly.
Very quick, right? They don't have the luxury of time.
No.
Right? And so they've got to move quickly.
You see, that's a huge difference with Belgium.
So what happens in Belgium? How is it different to what happens in Dubai or the Middle East typically?
Well, I think we're the only country where outplacement is mandatory for two groups of people. People from over 45 or people who have a seniority of more or less 9 years. It's rather logical for the 9 years because once you spend 9 years in the same environment and then all of a sudden you have to reinvent yourself, the life changed, not as quickly as in Dubai, of course, but everything changes, and so it's mandatory. And every mandatory outplacement has to be 12 months with a minimum of 60 hours of outplacement.
Wow.
But the law finishes there. It's not detailed. The 60 hours can be like 4 hours with a coach and the rest in workshops collectively or a platform. We at Pangloss, of course, we provide much more. We actually do the outplacement as it was thought 40 years ago. So for most of the companies, it's an insult to say that you didn't evolve in 40 years. But in outplacement, it's the biggest compliment you can make because it's a really one-to-one individual coaching with a person so that we can adapt to the person who is, and every individual is living the redundancy completely differently, as you know, of course. So the aspect of time is completely different, but of course, the people who want to work, and most of them wants to work, they don't want to spend a year or 2 years. They're rather quickly active, but of course without that real pressure like here, which changes completely the. So how do you handle that? I can't imagine how you can work with a person on his mindset, on his psychology, on his knowing that he's probably not sleeping at night because he's looking at his children thinking like, oh, in 2 weeks we have to leave if I don't find something. How do you handle that as an outplacement company?
You know, I think that's a great saying, right? That necessity is the mother of invention, right? That because you have to do something, you are driven in a completely different way, right? To looking at your job search. And so I think as a result of that, it helps people to be forced to move on through the cycle of change much faster than in most environments, right? Whether it's in Belgium or Australia or other countries. Here you have to move quickly. And so on one side, you've got the psychology and the emotion, right, of the person that has to be dealt with. But then on the other side, you've got this practical set of tools and frameworks that they need to learn quickly to then help them to launch themselves into the market.
Yeah.
So I think, what we tend to do here is that we have to do both very quickly.
Yeah.
And so we do that through very much a consultative process. We support the clients to understand what timeframes we're working to. We obviously then have a condensed version of what most people would provide in other countries in an outplacement program. So what you'd get in 3 months, you'd get in 3 weeks, right?
Wow.
And so that has to happen because we know that time, you're fighting against time, right, in this situation. And I think it's also an element of how do we support the partners, right, of those people who've been let go, through
so
that
you have
process.
a partner program as
We do.
Yeah.
It's very common for us to spend time with the partners to have a conversation with them, right? Because obviously they're living in an uncertain time. They're not sure what's going to happen as a result of this. So it's really important that they see each other if they are together, if it's typically a husband and wife or if there's some sort of relationship, that they see themselves as a team and that team has to operate with a high level of intensity to get to their desired goal, which is typically to find a job.
Yeah.
Right.
No, because we introduced that in Belgium too, but we don't get a lot of. They don't really ask for it.
Yeah.
Because the change is for the entire family, and
Yes.
so I thought like maybe. Also because outplacement is very unknown since it's linked to redundancy and most people are not fired 25 times in their lives, and if they are, there's another problem. So it's so that's standard in your program.
Yeah. It's not so common, but we also talk to the kids sometimes, right, about that, because kids can feel
Of
the
course.
uncertainty at home.
Yeah.
They can feel the stress, right? And so we don't do it often, but we do offer that as a part of the service because it's super important that that whole household is working in a more positive fashion in that short period of time. And these are life skills, right? We're teaching people, in sports psychology, we call it controlling the controllables, right? How do they learn to control the things in their control and manage those things effectively so that they can get to an outcome, faster? If you worry about things out of your control, you're going to create anxiety.
Yeah, voilà.
Right, it's natural.
And for
right?
nothing.
Yeah.
Because you can't control it.
Absolutely.
Our dear friend Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah, that's right.
Taught us that.
Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. And what's average time to rebound, to find a new job?
It's still typically 3 to 6 months.
Oh.
Right? And so it does take time. So sometimes you'll find that there's an extension, that's provided. Sometimes you'll find that people move a little bit more quickly. They might be looking even to move out of the region, right? And so that's
until they find a new.
Yeah,
but then they have to stop their rent, move everybody, remove.
So one of the things that's happened now, in fact, Dubai has moved very quickly on some of these things, is they've made getting a visa, for example, a freelance visa, right, in free zones, very easy. So you can get that in 1 day. You can actually apply for a visa. And that means that...
And what's a free zone?
So a free zone is an entity or an organization that you can set up that doesn't need to have ownership from a local.
Oh.
So in most developing economies, not just here in the Middle East, but if you look at Asia and other markets as well, that if you are not in a free zone type entity, you need to have the local citizens have some sort of ownership over the company, right? It's just to retain, that sense of ownership in the country.
Yeah.
But they've set up here free zones, and those free zones are 100% owned by you. You have obviously low tax and all those kinds of things that are benefits here, but that can buy you some time so that you can have the luxury of then saying, okay, instead of 3 months, I might have 6 months that I can afford. I know I've been saving up and using some savings, to keep going.
And for your rental agreement?
So that can also be lengthened a little bit. Usually landlords can be supportive of that. The other thing is, and this has changed a little bit recently, but rent here used to be paid upfront for the entire year.
Yeah.
Right? So landlords were happy.
Yeah.
Right? Even if you lost your job, they already had money in the bank.
Yeah.
Right? But now it may be paid every 3 months, every 6 months, so that they're a little bit more cautious of what's happening.
So not monthly.
You can, it's very rare to get monthly.
So Gaj, what would you say to an HR manager who thinks that outplacement is totally unnecessary?
That happens a lot. I would say that there are a few things. Right? One is about the duty of care that an HR manager has to its employees. Sometimes that conversation works, sometimes it doesn't. The biggest thing that I find has a large impact is the branding that our placement can provide.
The employer branding.
Employer branding. And so the idea that you are looking after people when they are at their worst point, right? When they have to leave the organization. And I think the part of that connects to this is the survivor syndrome, right? The idea that if we are going to terminate these roles in the organization, people are leaving, everyone is watching to see how those people are going to be treated by the organization. And if they're treated well, morale, productivity might increase. If they're not treated well, everyone is going to be questioning, when am I next? What's going to happen to me? Do I need to be investing my time in this organization? So I think all of those things are super important for an HR manager to realize. And sometimes they're not thinking about that, right? Particularly in the Middle East, it is not as common as it is in other developing economies to have a very empowered HR. There are some organizations that have wonderful HR leaders and who are strategic and driving initiatives and doing those things. But a lot of companies in developing economies tend to have a much less powerful and influential HR managers. And so it's our placement is seen as a massive cost, right? Do we need to impact our P&L in this way? Or can we just let people go and then we can go on with our day-to-day business? And so I think making that bridge very clear that this is about employer branding, it's about the morale of people who are left in the business, I tend to find is a much more powerful narrative.
No, exactly. We say I say in Belgium to our clients who are the HR people, your real employer branding is made in the recruitment process and in the exit process. Because all the campaigns you do and the things you do to show you're a top employer, if it's not lived by the people who apply to come and work with you so that they don't get an answer if they apply or whatever, or are fired in a very unhuman way, all the rest of the cost you're investing, you can throw it away because that's the real employer branding. We once did a huge outplacement project for 50% of a company in Belgium, which of course I will not name. And so 50% had to leave and 50% could stay. And the ones who were leaving had to stay another 3 to 6 months. And after 2 months, the HR director calls me and he says, what's happening? The people who are fired are much more productive than the one who can stay. I say, yeah, because we're coaching them. And we're preparing the future and we're helping them to manage this very difficult 3 to 6 months because they have to invest themselves in something that will be ending. And no, but can you do something for the people who stay as well? And I said, you understood now that people need care, and care doesn't mean weakness or whatever. It's a big change, and if you can help people going through that change, it will go much more fluently.
And it kind of connects to this idea that the uncertainty not only impacts the people who are leaving, it's also the people who are staying.
Of course.
That's the discomfort. Discomfort is in both sides.
Of course.
Right? Which is interesting.
Of course. About the cost. Can you tell us a little bit how, is it a budget that you propose to your clients or how does it work?
Yeah, it's a very varied situation here. There is no standard.
No?
And so what you'll tend to find is that it could be anything from 3 to 4 sessions that you have, which might be maybe a few $1,000s, right? All the way through to 6 to 12 months of support, which is in the tens of thousands of dollars. And so that range is quite varied. Also depends on industry, it depends on level, it depends on the intensity of the work, as it is in every market, right?
So the client who approaches you says, like, we have a budget of so much, what can you provide for it? Or do you do a proposal?
Yeah, we do a proposal.
Yeah.
Sometimes they will be transparent with how much per head that they're willing to provide, and that we can work backwards from that to see what level of support. That's quite rare here.
Yeah.
It's mostly that, hey, we're going to let go of 15 people. What can you do to support them over the next 3 months? That's the typical request that we have.
And do you provide workshops as well, a collective?
Yeah. For one of the banks here, one of the international banks here, we did some work where we took about 130 people through a series of workshops because a restructure was coming 6 months down the line. And so no one knew who was going to lose their jobs, but the organization wanted to invest in getting the mindset of people ready.
Okay.
And so
for the entire community.
For that community of people. And so as a result of that, we worked through a series of these workshops. Out of that, some people requested one-to-one, very specific private sessions, which the bank was happy to support on.
Yeah.
But mostly that was done through workshops.
Okay. Interesting. So, Gaj, what kind of support do you think people really need after dismissal, but rarely receive?
I think the majority of support is given in a very transactional way, right, from employer to employee. And an example of that is, okay, we're going to lose your job. Termination of your visa is going to happen here. We need all the laptops back at this time. We need you to leave your desk at this time. And so that process is very transactional. There's a chain of command. What I think is missing is the emotional and mental support that is required. And in fact, that is the most important.
Yeah.
Because if that part is not right, as you and I know, right? If that part is not right, the process...
It's much longer.
It's much longer.
Yeah.
It becomes complicated and difficult, right?
Yeah.
And so I think organizations need to invest in getting the psychology of people into a healthier state so that they can then undertake that separation much more easily. I don't feel that they are really considering that as an important aspect of the separation process. What do you think? Do you find that a lot?
I couldn't agree more. During the pandemic, business was very low, as you probably know, and I said, like, okay, it's a bit cliche, but like most of cliches, this one is true too. Said I'm trying to convince my clients that I want to be their partner, and now this crisis offers me a beautiful opportunity to show them that I'm their partner. So I developed with a lawyer in Belgium free workshops for HR people how to fire somebody in a human way. So he gave the legal part of the topic, and I gave what you just described. Like, okay, firing somebody is like a personal 9/11. We all know where we were on 9/11. Most women do even know what they were wearing.
Wow.
No, it's true, because it was like a shock.
Yeah.
It's a trauma. And being in that exit conversation, it's very comparable. The employer says, like, I'm very sorry, I have to inform you that we're going to terminate your contract. And actually, the world collapses on that. So it's really important what you say at that moment, how you say it, to provide the time that the person can react, and really focused first on the emotional, psychological part, and then you can go to the practical side of things, because it's really, really important. So we really agree on 6,000 kilometers. We think the same in a different environment, but it's very, because at the end of the day, we're all human,
Yes.
right? And now, especially with the AI coming through, and it's very important to focus on the human side of things and the human side of a human,
Yeah.
right?
And that commonality, right? That every human is driven by the same formula.
Yeah,
Thoughts affect feelings.
Yeah.
Feelings affect behavior.
voila.
So if you want the right behavior to find a job and we
Yeah.
work backwards, if they're not feeling the right feelings,
Yeah.
that means they're not thinking the right things.
Voila.
Right? So we have to plant those seeds in
Yeah.
their thoughts in the most healthiest way. And I don't think necessarily companies who are doing the separation,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we hear of the terrible examples in the tech companies in the US, the way they let go of people,
Yeah.
right? It's so inhumane the
Yeah.
way that they do that. But they manage to get away with it, right? For whatever reason. They're so powerful and they can influence, laws and so forth.
Yeah,
But the people who are left behind are completely demotivated,
yeah.
right? Uninspired.
And we all know that motivation is the first
Yes.
reason a person is driven.
Yes.
It's the
Recognition or something?
recognition.
Recognition,
It's
yeah,
the
yeah.
first motivational driver, not money, not status, not the fact that you're recognized. No, how do you say?
Recognize, yeah.
Yeah, in what you're doing.
Yes.
It's the most important thing, and the rest is important too. But it's not at the same level. You can pay somebody the highest salary and whatever, but you never recognize what he is doing. He will not be motivated because
Yes.
then he will think like, "Why am I doing this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why am I doing this? Okay, for that big salary. Okay, it's nice, a big salary, but it's not. There is no effect on my feeling. What you said before. Really, now I understand why we are Arbora partners because we think the same things.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm interested, Muriel, when you're talking to people, or say someone's listening to this conversation now and they're really worried about making a change, right? What would you tell them to support them through that process of getting to making a change?
So, first of all, the only constant in life is change. Like, even biologically, our cells are renewed, and we're actually a new person every year, if you see it on that cellular level. So if you see, we were born, we were babies, then we became toddlers, then we became very annoying to our parents in puberty, and then young adults. I mean, it's a constant. Hoe zeg je dat nu? It's a constant, that change. So I believe that change is always for the better. That we have only one life. That we are all talented in some way. If you can get help to discover those talents, or you forgot them a little bit because you were in a toxic environment, or you were a bit in a low of your life, and which is all normal and no problem. But to be afraid of change is really a waste of time and energy, because I'm going back to my friend Marcus Aurelius. If you cannot control it, you have to accept it, and you have to have the courage to change what you can change. So for me, in my vision of things, change is always for the better. I mean, you don't change if there is no need, or situations don't change if there is no need. You know, one of my philosophies, I have several ones, is that if you look at a professional career, you have three elements: the individual, you, me, everybody, the company you're working for, and society in general. And the three of them are variables, because a human evolves. A company has to adapt constantly to changing markets, political changes. God knows we're in the right time frame to understand that. And society in general evolves also. Look at the pandemic. One virus could disrupt an entire system. So, and we expect from those three variables to evolve in the same direction for 40 years, which would be magic, right? So if you have like a pause or an exit or whatever change happening, first of all, it's life. And two, you need all that energy to focus on the managing of that change. So don't waste this energy in fear, in things you don't know, because it's a waste of energy. And that's the only thing you need at that moment where you're confronted to something. So that's my way of seeing it.
I would say with the change, it's interesting. Talking to people, when they're going through that process, I find a lot of them say that it's not a complete surprise that they were going to go through that change or that something was going to happen in the organization, right? They could feel that something was going to happen or they were unhappy, right?
Yeah.
They were looking around, right? But
When they realize
yeah.
that the comfort zone was not so comfortable.
And it's the fear.
Yeah.
The fear of the change. So one of the things that we try and do, and I'm sure you do this as well, is when we look at the fear of change, that is the resistance that's stopping people, right? Usually there is some value there, instability, insecurity, lacking of confidence, the sense that I'm not good enough,
Yeah.
right? Those kinds of things that get in the way of people then making that change. So all of a sudden, you lose your job. That is now the catalyst for you to make the change.
Yeah.
Someone externally needed to come and give you that push,
Voila.
right? So I find that it's, what we try and do is make that change a very positive discussion, right? To say, were you thinking of changing anyway?
Yeah.
Oh, actually, yeah, I was kind of looking
But I
around.
was afraid.
Yeah, that kind of comes up, right, in conversation. I'm sure you had that as well, right? So sometimes the universe has to kick us in the backside
Voila.
to get us to move. And it's giving us little clues along the way, but we don't want to listen to them, right? We hear them,
Because we're afraid.
but we're afraid.
Yeah.
So a lot of our work is about overcoming fear,
Yeah.
and particularly anxiety. And anxiety is a fear of the future. So if you don't see your future, you see it as a very uncomfortable space, you're not going to act to do anything to change. You're going to just continue doing what you know. But if your future is a much more positive one, I mean, you became an entrepreneur, right? If you didn't think your future was going to be better as an entrepreneur, you wouldn't have chosen this path.
No, of course
right?
not.
Of course you had to see that, right?
Yeah.
So no one picks a future whether it's going to be worse,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't happen. So changing that mindset, choosing a mindset, right? And a future that is more positive, I think works to fixing your attitude. It fixes your behavior
Yeah.
to get you on the right path.
And again, we agree. Really. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm really happy we're partners at Arbora. And I'm really happy you could free up your time to have this discussion
Well, I should
with
say
me.
thank you from flying from Belgium here
Yes.
to Dubai to have this conversation in
I had
person.
other reasons too, but you were one of my main reasons. Thank you very much. You're welcome to come to Belgium.
Thank you.
It would be nice if you're once in Western Europe to come and have a talk to our candidate.
Yes.
I hope we really gave some perspectives about changes and everything we discussed, and because that's the aim of this podcast, is to give perspective. Thank you. Thank you, Gaj.
Thank you, Muriel.